So what about foreign investment in the United States? How much of a revenue stream could that be for the economy? Well, we're going to tell you about an interesting scheme now which does bring in ad hoc chunks of cash, but it has a purpose far beyond that, and it hinges on the act of essentially buying a visa legally to live in the United States. It is a little-known visa called the EB-5, or more commonly the Investor Green Card. It was the result of the 1990 Immigration Act. And it's open to you if you've got $500,000. You hand over that cash, it's put into a project which generates at least 10 jobs in an underdeveloped part of the US, and you get your visa. No surprise, though, that there are complaints about the scheme. Critics say it is open to manipulation, and as such reforms are currently underway. But advocates say it was a lifeline to the real estate market during the financial crisis, and importantly, is a concrete job-creating tool. Well, our next guest runs a fund which puts money from the EB-5 visa program to work. He is Burke Edwards, Chief Operating Officer at the Texas Growth Fund Regional Center. Burke, tell me first up, where do you get most of your interest coming from? Which parts of the world?
Mainly we're from the Middle East at this point. Historically, the program has obtained most of the investment money from China. I think behind China it was, Vietnam, South Korea. But recently, over the last 2 or 3 years, there's been a lot more people from the Middle East.
Okay, and I mean, how positive has it been for your local economy? Obviously, we know the benefits for those who invest because they get their visa and they get to come to the United States. But what about the effect in the United States on your real estate market, for example, which has had a very rough few years, hasn't it?
Well, we had a financial crisis in the United States in 07 and 08 where traditional sources of capital dried up for developers, and so they had to look elsewhere. One of the places they looked is to the EB-5 program and the immigrant investor dollar being deployed into their real estate projects. And so it has definitely been a big assist to real estate development in the United States over the last 8 years. More so than ever before, because traditional financing after the financial crisis made money hard to get, hard to borrow in the United States, and so this was a good avenue for developers.
Okay, so I'm seeing the positives of it so far, and I would expect you to tell me about all those things. There must be challenges, though. I simply wonder about the idea of maybe not quite manipulation, but the idea that it's people with a lot of money who can come in and make this happen for themselves, and there might be a backlash to that.
Well, let's just say anytime you're dealing with a government entity, there's going to be pitfalls and delays. And with the increase in the popularity of the program in the last 2 or 3 years, especially, there has been delays in paperwork being processed by USCIS, and the path to citizenship is taking longer than we think it should. There is talk of reform that's going to make the process more efficient, and I for one welcome these reforms so that the system is more efficient for getting the immigrant investor dollar deployed and potential citizenship.
Yeah, but that idea of citizenship in the first place, that idea of being able to buy citizenship, is that problematic? Maybe I'm thinking of this too much through, the prism of Europe at the moment, where immigration is such a sensitive issue. But you know as well as I do, US citizenship is a very valuable thing.
Right. Well, keep in mind that it's restricted where you can spend this money. I mean, the whole concept is creating jobs in the United States in areas, specific regional areas that otherwise wouldn't have projects like these. So it's designed for rural areas or projects that need job creation, for those projects to be built in those specific areas. And so it's a complicated process. It's not something that just you write a check for $500,000 and you get a visa. It's much more complicated than that. The job creation component has to be strictly documented and verified subsequent to the construction. Third-party economists go back and verify to the government that we did in fact create 10 jobs for every 500,000. And those jobs have to be verified in order for the immigrant investor to end up with a permanent visa. So it's not as simple as writing a check. that's for sure.
Right, okay. Just finally, you said, well, I know this has been traditionally built on Chinese money. You've sent that a lot of Middle Eastern money has been coming into the program now. Do you go anywhere else? Do you actually target certain places in the world and say, right, we need to bring these places into the fold?
Well, one of the things that's happened is the Chinese marketplace, if you will, for our industry has become saturated. And so in order to get a visa approved for a Chinese person, it takes longer than it would for Vietnamese, for Qatar, for Egypt, for UAE. The other countries that are non-Chinese have their applications get through the system quicker. And so almost all regional centers are looking outside of China now. I specifically like the Middle East because I think that there are wealthy enough citizens in many of those countries that want a better life for their families and education for their children and a better lifestyle. There's definitely political instability in that area, and everybody knows that the migrant factor from that part of the world is huge. This is one of the more interesting ways for those that have the means to get to the United States and obtain citizenship.
Burke Edwards, very interesting talking to you and learning about the system. Thanks so much for your time.